everyone. We're so glad that you're joining us here this evening for our community conversations. We have a four-part series happening this fall. This is the second of our four. The first one was back in September. Our guest speaker was Lee Webster. She is, I think of her as the New Hampshire guru for home funerals and green burials. And if you're interested in that video, because it was recorded as well, we have a sign-up sheet in the back. If you want to give us your email address, we'll forward you that link and you can be able to view that if you missed it last month. But this month we're having a panel of folks from Davis Funeral Home. I don't know everyone's names here, so I'll let you introduce yourself. And then Mel Bennett is from Life Forest, and she's going to be talking about the innovations and the changes that she has started in her endeavors with alternative burial. So it's sort of a little double-sided coin. We're going to get a little bit of information from both sides of body disposition and how you want to handle those things for yourself, for other loved ones in your life, and start those good conversations in our community. So I think I'll start with Life Forest and let you just tell a little bit about
Davis. Gotcha. No worries.
Davis Funeral Home, and let you just give a little bit of information, history about your funeral home and what you do, and then we'll have Mel introduce, and then we'll go to questions from the audience.
Okay. So on behalf of Home Health and Hospice, I'd like to thank them for allowing us to be here tonight. My name is Bob McIntosh, the current owner of the Davis Funeral Home. Davis Funeral Home has been in business since 1842. We've been on Lock Street, and literally within 75 yards of where we originally started, we've been in the same area for these 181 years. We are the second oldest funeral home in the state, and certainly one of the oldest funeral homes in the country. We are certainly still family owned and operated. Back in 9th grade, I was very young. I always knew I wanted to be a funeral director. It's just, I think I lost a lot of friends and family members at a young age, and it just seems like as a young person, I was always at a funeral. And I decided very young that that's what I wanted to do, and I've been doing this, right out of high school. So Davis Funeral Home was owned by the Davis family from 1842 to 1971. And then there was two previous owners after that, and I took the facility over about 5 years ago. I have my staff here, which is Jodie Reynolds. She's been the office manager for a little over 20 years. And this is Andrea Travers. She's a licensed funeral director and embalmer. And this is Logan McIntosh, my son. And he just graduated from embalming school last month. And he's looking to get his license probably in the next month or so through the state. Okay. That's a little brief history about the funeral home. At this point, we'll hand it over to Life Force for an introduction or questions for us.
I think I'd like Mel to be able to give a little bit of information.
Sure, come right up. I'll give you my seat.
So I'm Mel, and I am from Life Forest. My inspiration to kind of start something that was different was an experience that I had over the loss of my mom. And I was in a position where, unlike Mr. Davis, is that still your name? McIntosh? I did not have education or family history in the business. So it has been quite the learning curve of ensuring we're doing the right things, doing it correctly, and involving the right educated people for what we're trying to accomplish. But the reason that it was really an inspiration for me is because when I was younger, I grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and it was the early 80s. So in 1984, there were these things, there were these riots going on in the streets of Lawrence, and I lived on Tower Hill, right behind the cemetery. And you would try to just get into your Pinto safely, and there'd be bush cans being thrown and whatnot. So my mom decided to engage us to be outside. We would go to the cemetery where it was beautiful and quiet. But the thing was, as a small child, I didn't think it was beautiful and quiet. I thought it was old and creepy and horrible. But it was an experience that I really kind of remember because at that time, my mother said to calm my fears around being in a cemetery environment, don't worry, sweetheart, death is natural. When I die, I'm going to become a tree, which I thought to myself, well, that's ridiculous. Because, this is 1984. All these different disposition options weren't really available. But she was using it as a euphemism. Death is natural. We can regenerate. And then I went through a trauma process where my mom was diagnosed with early onset at 50. 48, we started seeing the signs. At 50, it was real. And in that process, I learned something about what it's like to have a loss of control when it comes to death and illness. And in that decade-long time frame in which that illness just slowly took her, I grasped at a lot of things to try to control the situation and retake back my abilities to comfort my mom and my abilities to have a mom. And I found myself in moments, right? So if I could just find a pair of socks that were warm enough that her feet would be warm, then all this would go away. Or at least for 1 second, she would feel a moment of peace. And, through this loss of control, at the end of her life, after a 5-year stint of her staring at a ceiling, not being able to feed herself or communicate, I learned it's my turn. Now I can have control over how my mother is treated. But unfortunately, what I found as kind of a civilian, let's say, is that I didn't actually feel like I had a lot of control because her body was whisked away, she was cremated, and I was returned half of her ashes in a box in a Starbucks parking lot. And I thought, all of this grief, and this is what she gets? Like, she's in a plastic bag in a box, and I get half of her in a parking lot? She deserves better. She deserves more, and I'm going to make better, and it's going to be amazing. And so, like most of you, I'm sure, I think a lot of people, I took her half of her ashes and I put her in my cabinet near the turkey tray. And for 3 years, when I went to reach for that turkey tray, I'd say, "Hi, Mom. Don't worry, it's going to be amazing. We're going to do something amazing." But nothing clicked, and I just felt grief. But then I saw this thing about this urn that you could bury the ashes and plant a tree, and I thought, oh. I went right back to my childhood with my mom's comfort words saying, "Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll be a tree." And I thought, oh, this is it. My mother is gonna be a tree. Of course she was right, she's gonna be a tree. And so I called my local cemetery because cemeteries are very important because they track genealogy. Cemetery record is where we have our history and our genealogy. And that was important to my particular family. And I wanted that for her. I wanted her to exist in space, in time. I wanted that acknowledgement that she was here. And so I said to the cemetery, "I have this amazing proposition for you. If I buy a plot, may I please just plant a tree instead of put that headstone?" And they said, no, like trees are the enemy of a cemetery because the roots kind of mess things up, let's just face it. And I said, oh, okay. And I called a couple more, and then I found out this is not gonna, this is just not the design that they actually employ. Like, this is not what they do. And so I sat with it, and then I thought, well, maybe you could do this. Like, maybe you're overthinking it. Maybe you could just simply buy a piece of land, put it in conservation, deed that she's there, so her name is on at least, and then hire somebody to take care of her tree It all was so simple, right? I was like, oh, yeah, I got this. And I was telling a very close friend of mine who I know through my adoptive community about this idea. He said, oh, what are you up to, you crazy old lady? And I said, oh, wait till I hear. I'm totally burying my mom in a piece of land that I find, and I'm going to put it in protective easements, and then I'm going to hire a landscaper to take care of her tree so I can go on vacation. And he was like, wow, that's a nut bag. Like, but it's actually really lovely. And he said, you know, maybe you should consider the fact that other people may like that, may embrace that. And that was the kind of the beginning of our journey. And it's just really lovely. And so that's kind of how it started, is just kind of utilizing design that exists, cemetery design that currently exists, but with a different kind of approach. So this is a little bit about Life Forest. Every burial plot, we're a legal state recognized cemetery, which means that every burial is recorded with the Registry County of Deeds. So when you do your job and you're finding your disposition option, we're a selection. And that is so very important to be a legal. Yeah, it is. It's essential. And so when somebody interns their loved one, they can say, okay, we're at Life Forest, so that this legacy protection is continued. Because you look at it twofold. You're protecting the environment, and you're protecting the legacy of the people in whom you've committed to, right? So this is just a little bit, I didn't know she was going to go through this, but. Okay. So yeah, we try to kind of, you know, on the surface of what we present to our families, we try to keep it as simple as we can, because you're going through situations that are difficult. But at the same time, what I tried to do is take all the things as just kind of this regular person that knew nothing about the design and how it works, and say, boy, I didn't like this part of it. I liked this part of my experience, so that's good. But I didn't like, you know, that I didn't understand the pricing. I don't like that. I didn't like that I felt like if my mom wanted to have her cat buried with her because the cat treated her the same from when she was her healthy self versus her not healthy self. That cat gave the consistent same amount of love, and my mother loved the cat. It was comfort. Why can't her cat be memorialized with her in a way that makes sense? And given the importance in which that cat served in her life. And I didn't like that was like, okay, you can sneak them in. I thought, well, why are we sneaking some you know, animal companion in our lives that are so important? Why do we have to sneak this? You know, I don't like to live a life in which we have to sneak. So I said, all right, we got to figure out, can we legally, you know, bury pets with their people in the same space and memorialize and get those answers? And so that's kind of where it started, just saying, how can we give people back the control after they've lost control to this terrible disease or illness or situation? And then say, memorialize the way that you want to memorialize. Do you want to be involved in the burial process? Do you want to shroud your own loved one? How do you want to commemorate? Do you want your beneficiary to be your best friend because maybe the person that's closest to you in your family isn't so good to you? You define your beneficiaries. You be buried with who you want. You decide who your family is. And all of that just kind of became a stance in which we kind of approached everything that we do, but also we listen. We listen to the families that come, and when they say, boy, you know, this is what I would like to see, we say, oh, you know, that's actually an amazing idea, and that's a wonderful approach. Why can't we think about how that's legal and how we can incorporate that in a way that makes sense? So it has morphed and changed over the past 4 years, 5 years, into something that has been a singular passion of mine and a commitment to do something for my mother so that I could kind of heal my own trauma experience into something that is just kind of collaborative, where we all listen to our traumas and try to integrate like the threads of and listen. We just listen. What do you need? How do we address that? And in that, there's a lot of similarities and in grief that we experience. But I think flexibility is a big part of it, you know, being able to kind of approach it in the way that makes sense to you. So that's life for us. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm hoping that someone in the audience may have some questions for anyone on the panel. We're certainly open to letting the dialogue begin and just let it organically grow from there. So feel free to pose your question. I'll try to restate it just to be sure that the recording allows it to be heard so that everyone knows what the answer is pertaining to, or if you want to restate the question when you're answering, just to be sure that everyone hears. That'd be great.
Carmen, I'm wondering if we could go back to Davis and just get a little bit of an understanding of the range of services that come from a traditional funeral home. And also I'm interested in what you've seen as trends through the years as people start to think about, you know, you hear these terms creming and even people being cremated versus buried, sort of what those trends look like. I'm just curious about the perspective from a more traditional side. And then I know that there are also ways that these two can kind of work together. So I thought that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, so obviously cremation is very popular. New Hampshire is one of the top 10 states for cremation. I think they're close to 70%. So New Hampshire cremation is very popular. Burial also is another common form of disposition. So traditional burial at a cemetery, metal casket, wooden casket with a vault, that sort of thing. People also don't realize body donation is pretty common too. So you can donate your body to science for various different causes. So that's also a pretty common form of disposition. But mostly we see cremation, just is pretty typical in today's day and age.
I know since I've started, it used to be, we used to have, oh gosh, probably like in a week we'll just like 3 traditionals and, you know, and maybe like a cremation. And now it's just cremation with some traditional burials involved. And in that, it has gone from having standard like 2 to 4, 7 to 9, to just kind of having more of like one session of visitation when there's visitation. Also having celebrations of life where, you know, even if there was like a real, you know, a full burial, they don't necessarily have that part that's for the private, for family. And then they have this huge celebration of life and have everybody come and share memories. And I've also seen that obviously with urns as well. We've gone through so many different unique things at the funeral home. We have some families that have buried on their own property. And in that, you can definitely do that. Each city and town has different regulations. We've you know, helped families do kind of burials at sea, coordinated with a company that's here in New Hampshire, actually Massachusetts, but they're New England Burial Services. I know personally my son's friend lost his mother and grandmother, and they're at the Lake Forest. Aww. And my son went before me, so there you go.
I'll ask later.
But I mean, there's been so many changes. There's nothing that we won't do as long as, you know, no one gets in trouble, really. You know what I mean? Like, to honor somebody. I mean, we'll just do whatever a family really wants, you know, obviously within the rules. I don't know, you guys have had a lot of unique things to do.
I'd say probably, I started about 6 months before COVID. So a lot of things have changed, you know, pre and post COVID. I'd say a lot that has changed with like the celebrations of life. People don't seem to necessarily be in a rush to get in crowded areas. They want to take their time, they want to plan it right. That's something my parents just did. My grandmother passed recently in August, but they didn't have something until this weekend. So Yeah, the no rush aspect seems to be a big thing, especially with cremations as tight as possible. Very traditionally, it's something that's been done within a few days, but now it's something we can kind of give people more space with.
Yes, please.
So I have heard a couple of presentations on, but I'd like to know more about the green burial, where you have no embalming, no cremation, no casket, no vault, any of that. So is there anyone here that can speak to that tonight? Or did no one come from that
Well,
faction?
yeah, that side of things was part of our presentation in September with Lee Webster. So if you want to share your email address with us, that entire presentation is on a YouTube video, and I'm happy to send that to
Yeah, I
you.
do want to see that. But does a funeral home get involved with that at all? Can you carry the carcass? Can you transport the body?
In theory, family can do a lot, actually. The biggest thing is to get the proper paperwork for the burial, and a lot of times that does involve a funeral home. In my career, there was a family who wanted to bring their loved one to us and also bring them to the crematory, and we did provide the paperwork for them because City Hall wouldn't do that. So we did do that, and they did bring they took their loved one everywhere, and they had the paperwork, the permit to be okay and legal in New Hampshire.
So does the life force space allow green burials? Or do you have to
We don't, but I can speak a small amount to it because I'm really involved. As a cemetery sexton, I work a lot with cemeteries that do offer green burial. And so I'm a member of something called the Conservation Burial Alliance. And that is a group of different organizations throughout the country that offer full body natural burial. And I've learned a lot through passive conversations about what that is and what that means. And we also just recently did a presentation for the New Hampshire Cemetery Commission. So we have a member of our team who serves on their board of directors. And a lot of these cemetery keepers, Manchester, Concord, are getting questions from families that say, hey, I'd really like a natural burial. I have relatives in your space, and can you offer that? So we talked about the legal setup of a hybrid cemetery approach within a municipal cemetery setting. Do you have any specific questions around it? If I can't answer it, I will. If I can't, I can tell you who can.
Just because I have no family or friends that I think that would want to be involved in it, I need to seek out who would do that for me. But I didn't know if the funeral home would get involved at all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
To just transport the
Of
body.
course, yeah,
You have to
definitely.
dig the hole.
So there is in fact, funeral directors play a really important role, believe it or not, in green burial. There are states in which you are mandatory, working with a funeral director is mandatory. I have,
Is New Hampshire one of those where it's mandatory?
I don't know the answer to that. No, okay, so, but I do know that we actually rely a lot on licensed funeral directors. And they have not only the ability to handle the body, transport the body, file the appropriate paperwork, but they are educated in being able to naturally prepare the body without embalming. They oftentimes have the way to keep the body cool prior to the burial. I can tell you as a cemetery keeper, I probably would not work directly and only with a family. I would really rely on a licensed funeral director because of what I'm hearing from other cemetery keepers. And that doesn't mean that they're taking away the right for home funerals. They could bring the body to your home in order to have the funeral. It's really a matter of the legal logistics and body care after death. But as far as prepping the burial hole, Lebanon, for example, does offer green burial. So the municipal cemetery in Lebanon is the first in the state.
But do you have to be a citizen of
No, you don't have to.
Some towns you have to.
Yes, that is very true. Lebanon, you can be actually from anywhere. So you can be from any state and you can be from any county. The pricing is different. So it's just something to note. And depending on how far away you are, you're going to think about the distance. And like if you're looking at environmental impact, is the distance in which you're bringing your body and getting it there, kind of offsetting, you know, maybe a cremation offset. You know, it's just all these things that people kind of ask to consider. But they have a lovely option for natural burial, and I think you're welcome.
I have a question. When I first found out about Life Forest, I was very excited. Read an article about it a few years ago, I think, and understood it was cremains only.
Yes.
But today I looked at your website because I was going to come here, and it talks about composting.
Yeah, so we are.
Talk about that.
Do you guys want to talk anything about do you guys have any like knowledge around that, and then I'll take over?
At least at the moment, I know it's only legal in a few states, like New Hampshire, California,
New York.
maybe Vermont.
New York?
Yeah, it's not New Hampshire.
No, I meant New York.
New York, yeah, it was
New York,
accepted in New York, but they haven't
California.
started anything as of now.
So your organization exists other places?
So we have legally buried composted remains. We do not compost, so we're not actually a place of doing the disposition. So we wouldn't accept the body and then roll it and add the alfalfa and the microbes and whatnot. We worked with Recompose. We work with compassionate composting, and there's a new place, and I haven't worked with them directly, called Return Home. The issue with what we have done is when we worked with the state of New Hampshire in the subsurface division, we asked about the requirements around safety of burial of composted remains. And it was kind of advised to us that we test the soil in 5 kind of gallon increments. And so if you're being composted in Washington and we're in New Hampshire, you know, getting an entire truckload of a human back here is maybe not make a lot of sense. But we did bury composted remains that we received from compassionate composting in Auburn, Maine, from 2 horses and a dog. And then we took that soil as an example to learn how to do it legally and appropriately. And working with the state of New Hampshire, basically, I don't know how much you want to get into the... I do. Okay, all right. So cut me off if I'm dull, all right? Like this, I don't know if it's your thing. But basically, it's so new, right? So there's not a lot of like kind of rules and regulations about it, but there is a lot of knowledge around safety. So you have this kind of take where the body is a human, and then it goes through this process. And like a human, once you cremate, is now a product of ash. So that product is no longer a human, it is ash. And that is how it's legally looked at. I didn't know that before I was in any...
Why is it ash and not soil?
Right, well, so let's say, but same theory, right? So you have the human, and now the human is soil. That soil is a product. So basically, like with any product, that soil needs to come with a soil data sheet. And that data sheet allows the Department of Agriculture to review the composition of the soil and ensure that it's safe for where you're putting it. So the New Hampshire, the subsurface division said, do you want to bury this? I said, yes, I do. And I want to deed record it. I want to give legacy to these horses that we're burying. And I want a legacy of the space and legacy of the land. And he said, you can do that. But unless they're sending you with a data sheet, and unless they are a registered product in which the state of New Hampshire monitors, then I'm going to need you to test every 5-gallon surface of soil, because some may be fully composted, but some may not. And if you reach into the soil that's not fully composted and you bury that, then the nutrients from around the soil are going to, as it continues its process of composting, it's going to suck nutrients from the surrounding soil. And I said, I had no idea I was an English major. Okay, no, I mean, honestly, I was like, just tell me what I need to do.
What I've read about it also says it replenishes the soil.
It
As-
really is
as
a
you
beautiful
do.
thing. I love
So-
it. I really love it.
And what I want to say is, until what year did we bury people without a vault? I mean,
I know, exactly. I mean,
people were buried in the garden. I mean, this is not new.
Yeah, I think it's in fact, I'm very engaged in it and I really love it. And it would probably be what I choose for myself. But when we look at it, where are we now? This is where, as kind of a cemetery keep, we can bury 5 gallons of compost if that's what you want, as far as a legal cemetery burial. Or if you want to like bring home the soil, you know, use it in your garden and whatnot. I'm sure the regulations are very different.
But what I really appreciate about what you started out with is that people who care about the genealogy want a place to prove the person existed or
Yeah.
have the marker, right? And that's part of the decision. And so basically you're saying we have a long way to go yet before there's natural burial that isn't cremains. I mean, I'm with you. So I want another option.
Yeah, I mean,
And I also think one more thing that I learned, if you want to be buried with your loved one, whoever that might be, you can't bury them first. The cremains to be mingled have to be buried at the same time. Is that true?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
If one person dies before the other, and you want to be buried, you want to be co-mingled, buried together, you can't bury the cremains of one person first. You have to wait till both die.
yeah, it's hard to mix this. You would have to undig them up and to add them.
You technically could, you could disinter the urn.
Yeah.
And we have something, companion urns, so you can fit, you know, 2 sets of
Just
urn,
put them
2
in
sets
the
of
same
remains in
place.
one urn.
Yeah.
Because we've had some families bury the urn and we have notes, you know, that later on, when their loved one passes, we're gonna take them back out and we're gonna actually do that
Oh, you
and then
are?
place them back in. So we have done that,
All right.
yeah.
Yeah, we do future internments, and if somebody wants to be commingled, then we just ask. Yeah, it would be impossible in our design with a tree, but we would say, if you want to commingle, then hold the ashes and then we'll help you to do that if you'd like, and then we'll bury together, or you would just have to be adjacent to, you know, you would be buried next to the person, but not commingled. But that would have to be a later date.
Could I ask you to clarify one thing you said at the beginning about having a truckload of compost delivered from wherever?
Yes.
You might want to clarify, your 2 horses might have been a truckload?
Yes, we had a 5-gallon bucket.
But a human being is usually about 1 cubic yard, not
Okay.
a truckload.
How long does it take to compost a human body?
There's 2 different approaches as of right now. And the recompose site, it takes a month. But they use a more digitized process, so it's a little bit more, they have a monitored way of doing it. So they'll monitor the heat, everything is like, oh, it needs a little moisture, you know, a little more micro.
And where do they do it? Where is
They
it?
do, currently they are in Washington State.
Oh, way out.
Yeah, they're way out.
And it's the only facility?
That's the only recompose facility that I know of. And then there's 2 other facilities. One is called Herland Forest. They are also in Washington State. They use a very natural way. So you have the kind of really kind of computerized composting way. The other way, his way, takes about 4 to 6 months. And you're literally in a barrel outside, and they do this. And then they hand pick out the bones, and it's the whole thing. I hand it to you guys.
Why do they have to hand pick the bones out?
Because the bones aren't gonna compost in the same amount of time, so they have to pick out the bones, and then they crush them and put them in so.
That's what they do with cremains.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, or alkaline hydrolysis, yeah.
Do you know anything about the aqua burial? The aqua?
Like
Yeah.
aquamation?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that's not approved in New Hampshire, but it's done in kind of like a tube under high pressure, high heat. It's basically water cremation. They call it resomation or aquamation, but it's not approved in New Hampshire.
So is it Maine?
I think Maine it is approved.
It is in
I
Vermont.
saw an advertisement.
Yeah, they use they use water, and it's, forgive me for this reference, but because I'm not, basically it's like boiling a chicken. You know, you boil and then the flesh comes off. Sorry. I know. I don't know. And then once the body and any of all that's left is bone, the bone is then removed, crushed into a very soft state, like almost like a sand. And then the sand bone, it's not sand obviously, but you know, that is what's returned as the cremated product. So it has a very similar weight and feel to the ash, but a different look. It's very clean looking. The concern around what I've heard about aquamation is that when the water has been boiled and you've taken the affluent from the body, as it's released back into whatever system, the pH level is at about 11. And most municipal, like in order to reprocess the water in order to be safe for us to drink, it's just a little bit high. So that's where kind of the legal complications come in, is how do you safely take that affluent in the water and put it back into a system? And I'm sure they're going to figure it out. It's just, that's, I think, what I've heard about the environmental concerns. I'm like, oh, we can't do that because our municipal system can't.
Yeah, there's a lot of manufacturing companies just polluting our world.
Oh, I know, right? Well, there's plenty, you know, like.
You just can't put a human body in the ground.
Yeah, well, and that's
like
the
I
most.
buried my cat in the ground, you know.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean, that is the most, obviously, the most green, simple approach. It is.
I have a question.
Actually. Okay, sure.
You mentioned pets and humans. You guys do, like if I have a cat and I want to go with my cat, we can go together?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and sometimes we commemorate the cat more. Just I am totally kidding. But, no, but we have, in fact, I have kind of an entertaining story around that. When we started out, we had kind of this, you know, okay, we're definitely going to do people and pets together. We can legally do it. It's no problem. And this gentleman came to me and he said, I heard that you bury people and pets together. And his husband had just passed away. And he said, I'm going to tell you right now, he was a high-end designer, and there is no way that he would want to be buried in a forest. He's like, he wouldn't have the shoes for that. He doesn't want to be any part of the forest. He's like, but unfortunately, you're the only place that I can find that's going to commemorate him with his dogs. And his dogs were his companions when he was very ill and his protectors. And he said, don't you sneak my dogs. They have to be commemorated with me. And he said, I was left with this task. And so I said, well, I can do that part. And he said, well, this is also what you're going to do. You're going to bury him right next to the parking lot because he is not to be in the forest. And I was like, I can do that too. And this photo is actually his husband's tree, and he chose a pink diamond hydrangea. And this tree is spectacular. His husband's doing a good job in just saying hello to everybody that comes into the site. He is the greeter. He's fancy. Everybody's like, this tree is beautiful. Like, yes. That's exactly what we do here. We just grow beautiful trees. But there was not a toe stepped into a forested area. So I have to say that it is just really a matter of listening to what people want. But the pet, we had a service for his husband and his dogs. He had 3 dogs, and every name, date, experience, description was equally as memorialized in his service at the side of the burial, and that was very important to this person.
I like that.
Yeah, it was nice, and it was a wonderful and beautiful service. What an amazing family. they had so much grief and so much laughter. I was like, I slept for a week after, I think. I had an emotional roller coaster of, oh, this dog, and then they made me laugh. So, yeah, it's doable, it's all doable.
And just on that note, I have the remains of one of my cats, and the cat that I have now is still living. But my plan is I'm going to be in Life Forest, and I'm going to hopefully have both of my cats' remains buried with me. And I was concerned, I had my cremation pre-planned, and I had this worry about how I was going to get from Manchester to Hillsborough to be buried. And
Strong
I was,
wind. A strong wind. It's easy, Richard.
So I called the Cremation Society, and they said, yes, we can do that for a fee. And so I called Danielle at Life Forest, and I explained to her my dilemma. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to get to the cemetery. And she said, oh, well, that's no problem. I'll just pick you up on my way to work.
Danielle,
And
she's
so that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's nice. I love it.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's so funny. Oh, she's so.
But yeah, I think it's all possible, but as I'm sure they would advise, everything needs to be communicated and written down somewhere. So, I mean, Richard has a file, and we document that this is what's happening, and this is what he wants, and you ensure that that gets passed along and saved to ensure, and talking to people in your life about it as well, so.
And you know what? If it doesn't happen, I won't know.
You don't know. It's happening.
Don't you worry, it's happening.
I have a question about the documents that you just talked about, recording what you want to have happen.
Yeah.
What form does that document have to be? Is it attached to your will? Is it a separate document with the funeral home?
Talk to them and then I'll
Yes,
respond.
you know, we have families come in and they want to pre-plan their funeral, so we'll have them come in, we get the important information that we'll need to file death certificates and kind of do the behind-the-scenes work. But we'll sit there and ask, you know, what do you want? Do you want a playlist of your service? Do you want pictures? Do you want this kind of urn versus that kind of urn? So we really do try to figure everything out. I have, you know, I usually type out a list of things we talked about after you pre-need, just so, you know, if you don't die for 20 years, someone can look back at that and go, oh, this is what you wanted.
Yeah, we had a family just come in not too long ago, and we have a whole playlist and a CD that's gonna play, and there's some trip she went on, and that slideshow's gonna go on. Her whole family came and everything, and so we have everything written down and documented. I know sometimes families also do it with lawyers, and that's completely, you know, whatever you feel more comfortable with.
I think one word of advice would be, tell your family and your friends what you want.
Sure.
Don't just share that with the professionals, of course, share it with the
Yeah.
professionals, but share it with the people who love and care for you.
That may be more complicated than you think when
Yeah.
all the immediate family is gone and there's no more local family.
Well,
Good
then
point.
that could be with your lawyer. So for instance, I have my will, I have my advance directive, I have my cremation society agreement, and I have my Life Forest agreement. They're all in my safe box under my bed. And my lawyer has a copy of everything. And so I don't have any immediate family, but somebody will know what to do with me.
To go off of that, we actually had a woman just pass. She had no immediate family. Her lawyer had everything on file. We had arrangements on file. So us and the lawyer worked together to fine tune the details for the services. But with us and her working together, we made her wishes get followed through.
Yep.
So that is important. Document at the funeral home, document with your lawyer, and they'll ensure your wishes are carried out.
Yeah, we actually, we have a multifold approach, but when you kind of work with us and any sort of agreements, you know, as you say you secure a cemetery plot, there's two lines, and one of them says, do you have a trust lawyer? Do you have a trust? And we ask for that information specifically so that we can get that documentation sent from us to your trust. Do you remember that line, Richard?
that I gave anybody that information.
It should have been, there's a line on it, we're gonna talk. But there's a line that will say, is there a trust and how do we notify them? So that and then we'll send the internment, the rights, the burial right certificate, as well as any other directives to that lawyer directly, just in case somebody, while they're doing it, and it happens a lot, I'm sure they know this, some people are just in chaos mode because they're just not, they're not well, and they know this is impending, and we want to make sure that we do our part to help protect them as well. So some of it is just making sure that it gets to where it needs to be. And if you haven't supplied that, Danielle's going to be calling you. Should have assumed you'd have a trust lawyer. But also, what we do is we keep a lot of data. Of course, we have the traditional Google files, an envelope that everybody has, a little folder with their names, and that contains documents of wishes and idea who their cremation person is, or composting facility, so to speak, because that is a legal way of taking a disposition body. So we work directly with their funeral director, ensure that everybody's on the same page, we have all the same information. But we have a mapping system in which we include the legacy data within the map. So each GPS coordinate of the person's burial plot is a point of place. I want to tell you that just because you have a GPS coordinate for that point of place, it doesn't mean it's legal. Like, I don't want anybody to be deceived by organizations that say you have GPS coordinates, so you're safe. No, this pen has a GPS coordinate. That doesn't give it any legal rights, okay? So just keep that in mind, right? Number one. But number two, so you have this point of space. What that does for us is it creates a shapefile. And within that shapefile, we can include data. So we can click on a map in that point of space. And that data, wishes, cremation number if they're already buried, what type of tree, how long that tree is going to live, when do we need to notify the family that you think about replacing your tree. All of that is saved within the point of place. So that's a really unique approach in which we have created in order to have multiple ways of keeping this information safe. And that way, this is our mapping, this is required, this is how we find people's plots, but you also are going to click on that, and I'm going to learn that, Richard wants to ensure that the cremains of his cats, or cat at the time, and then obviously I'm going to have to take care of the other one till he goes, but anyway, are blended in his burial. But that's another way in which we kind of keep this data available.
Do you want to talk about the lack of headstones and the QR codes?
Oh, sure. So we use trees, and a lot of people, which is awesome, and there's a lot of people who are like, I want this tree because I have this really lovely memory of X, Y, or Z. But they also, this is about a person or a pet, or people and a pet. So when I was younger and we were visiting these large cemeteries, I can tell you, I'm not going to try to compartmentalize myself, but if I'm from the war zone of Lawrence, let's just talk about maybe my financial situation. It was probably not that good, okay? So you guys can figure that out. However, when we went to the cemetery, I would see these huge angels, "Rah!" And then not far away, there would be this tiny crooked stone, and it would be son of or daughter of, and I would think, oh, well, did that person love that person more because they can afford this lovely, beautiful angel? Did this parent that lost their child, that couldn't afford this huge angel, to me, there was this imbalance of memorialization and equity in that. And so when I thought about technology and how can we utilize technology with nature, it didn't seem like a hand-in-hand thing at first, until I realized, wait a minute, in a 2-inch little tiny square that costs nothing basically to create for people, you can memorialize equally. So you just scan the QR code that's at the base of the tree or the memorial planting or just there, and then you can bring up the photos, the pictures, the memories of these people through a simple link. And so that's a way that we try to integrate technology into the ability to have a memorialization that is equal. So there's not this kind of disparity within this space that's just simply be about love, right? And that was just kind of a personal desire of mine to have this kind of equity, and that's how we chose to do it. But yeah, that's how we memorialize. So there's a name and a picture and a date. So people often have a little photo of their loved one or their pet or whatever they'd like, and the name and the dates on this little kind of thing that doesn't take up a ton of space. And we include it because honestly, it doesn't cost very much to create. You know, like, it doesn't have to be $1 billion. It just has to have a purpose. And so that's kind of how we chose to do it.
So certainly you can visit both Life Forest website and Davis Funeral Home's website, getting more information. I think we have just a few more minutes left for questions. We're happy to forward on any information we've had from prior sessions, if you give us your contact information, and we welcome you to join us for the last 2 sessions in our series this fall. November 14th, if I have the date correct, Tanya, is going to be specifically for veterans, and so Fund of Funeral Home will be coming and presenting on that topic to help aid families and veterans in their process and their decision making. And then on the 28th of November, we'll have funerary artisans who will be coming. So the sample shroud that's out back that is used by Life Forest, it will be on display, and we'll be able to provide information on that, but we'll have several other artisans who provide pine coffins with no nails, no glue. There are woven caskets from willow, memorials with blown glass. So we're having a number of individuals who can come and talk about their art and how they incorporate that into an individual's end-of-life decision-making and things that they want to do to personalize it for them. So I don't want to close before we make sure there aren't any additional questions from folks. We certainly appreciate you coming, your interest, your enthusiasm about learning this information and maybe making changes in the way we take care of ourselves and our loved ones at end of life. So thank you so much for being here. Are there any other questions before we close? Yes, please.
I do have one. If you donated your body to science, what happens? I mean, I understand the whole, they're going to use it for science, but do they give it back when they're done? Do they keep it?
That's a great question. Well, it does depend on the institution that you choose. You do have to choose an institution before your death, so kind of like a pre-arrangement, but with that institution for donation. Sometimes people are donating their body because they have a strange brain disease that's very rare and people want to study it. And sometimes people are donating their body so that college students can learn how to perform surgeries and things like that. In those cases, I know those people get cremated and returned to the family after the fact. I did visit, I think it was Boston University when I was in school, and they do a really good job of just making sure all of that person remains with that person and gets cremated and returned to the family.
So it's not a decision that you could make after the person has died. It has to be prior to.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
It's actually an application process,
Yeah.
and you can
Yeah.
actually be rejected at the time of death.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, they check a bunch of requirements when the death occurs, and then hopefully, everything is good and we bring the individual right away. But there has been some that have been accepted, but because of circumstances, they weren't accepted actually at their time of death.
Thank you.
Donate me to a museum so they could see what a real woman looks like. I'm kidding. Nobody wants.
Mel, do you want to make one last comment about Life Forest being a community space and
Yeah.
how there are other events besides funerals that go on there?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think that a big part of the study of the history of cemeteries brings us to the idea that cemeteries were once graveyards. So they were graves in the yard of a church or some sort of religious community. And then kind of morphed into municipal spaces that were just cemeteries. And this isn't a statement about religion at all, but the fact is that now you have a space without a support. So who's bringing the casserole if you don't have a community anymore? And I'm really all about the casserole. So the thought to me was, you know, the more engagement we have, and if we can create a community space of support, then people will come together and they're going to tend to their spaces, they're going to tend to each other, and it's going to happen naturally. So we have a concert series. In fact, I think did you play at Life Forest? We had a harpist play. It was amazing. I don't know how many talented harpists there are out there, but we have community concert events where people can come and just hang out with each other and then walk the trails. We do children's book readings because children should not be scared to be at a cemetery. We do fairy building events, so they build the older teenage kids will come and work with the younger kids, and they find pine cones, and we build like little fairy spots. We had a midnight market, which was phenomenal. It was so beautiful. All the trees were illuminated. Richard came and helped us and was our kind of shuttle driver, and I can't tell you, it would have been a disaster if he wasn't there. But
there were 40 vendors who came and were selling their products and services and whatever, and we have no idea how many people actually showed up. You couldn't see the end of the cars.
It was wonderful. And you know what, I'm going to tell you, I was very scared. I love the idea of the community coming together, and I love art, and I love local offerings, and just people being able to be in this space with their loved one close by. But I was terrified that in the dark somebody was going to step on something, like break a branch. So we made sure that the burial area was kind of isolated. Each tree was gently illuminated so you could see, what are we here for? Like, let's all remember, this is a wonderful time, but this is a sacred space. The next day, we all left at midnight, packed up. The next day I went to clean up. I mean, we had 40 vendors and a taco truck, and I would say close, maybe 400 to 600 people. Do you think that could even? Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of people. And do you want to know what I found for trash?
Probably nothing.
I found one fortune cookie. One fortune cookie and one little cord. And it was pitch black. Though nobody left a taco shell, nothing. I couldn't believe that many people came through the space and there wasn't one scrap of accidental trash. So people get it, you know, they get it and they respect it. And that's about the community. That's what's important. We're just there for each other. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
I think that's important.
Thank you too. Yeah. Do it again. I want to go.
Yeah, it's really fun. They have such cool stuff.
And what town is this?
Hillsborough.
Hillsborough, New Hampshire?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I see Maine? Why did I think?
We have a second site that's opening in Maine. It's a host site.
Well, yeah, Hillsborough's not too far.
No, it's great. We have 100 acres. Come and explore. Just don't get lost.
Kind of near there's the veterans cemetery.
Boscawen?
That's beautiful.
It is
Yeah,
beautiful.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm not a veteran, but I've been with other people.
Well, with that, I just want to thank our presenters, everyone from Davis Funeral Home, Mel from Life Forest, for all the wonderful information that you're sharing and all the thought-provoking questions and information that's out there. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time. And thank you everyone for coming and your questions.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.